All right. Can't really see you all, but have the majority of folks been able to type in the chat? Yes. Nodding. Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so we are going to move on. Again, welcome to our evening series, our racial equity series. As I mentioned, my name is Kia Baird, and I am here representing the Health Improvement Collaborative. The Health Improvement I keep saying that, it's the Health Improvement Collective, and Steph is representing the Black Health Collective. No, see, I did it again. It's impossible. This is why we use the acronym. This is why we just use acronyms. But anyway, so I'm here from the HIC, and the HIC is a group of organizations that are working across the region, across sectors, to better the health of folks in our region. So we have representation from faith organizations and hospitals and mental health organizations, grassroots community organizations, health districts, everyone who is gathering together to do this work to increase the health and well-being of the people that live in our region. So that is the work we do. If you are not already a HIC member, please do, share your email address and let me know that you're interested in being on the HIC. We would love to have you. You start to get to see all these same faces a couple meetings a month and do that work. And the HIC approaches that work with some of these, which you may have seen before. We consider the social determinants of health, right? So these are the things, this is the framework with which we do our work. And if you see this list of things, these are these determinants of what determines our health, right? These are the things that can either be barriers or they can be deterrents, or they could be helps or harms, but these are the things that kind of dictate how healthy we will be as people, as a community. And this specific collective of folks acknowledges that racism is kind of the through line for all of these things, right? So the systems that have created barriers to people's health all really have been structured through and because of racism. And we are working to dismantle these barriers to better health. And we are doing that by addressing the racism that is the underlying cause. So, and I'm new to the work, right? So I get to hand it off to some folks who have been doing this work for some time, one of whom is Stephanie Clark, who is going to be our moderator for the evening.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So if you still have your screen on gallery view, I am a Black woman with glasses, shoulder length locks, and I have lots of artwork around me. And I, as Kia just mentioned, am your moderator for the evening. So how we're going to start is I'm going to invite Ms. Edith Pestana to join us, come off mute please, and share with us definitions of environmental justice and environmental racism before we get started.
Okay. So I want to thank Stephanie and Kia for inviting me into this group. I was looking forward to joining you this evening. I am the administrator for the Environmental Justice Program at the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I identify as a Cuban American. I have been with the Connecticut DEEP for almost 28 years. Prior to that time, I was an epidemiologist with the State of Connecticut Department of Public Health, where I did environmental epidemiology, and I had let's just say I had a specialty or a draw to looking at health disparities in Connecticut. Okay, so that's kind of why I'm here. I was giving a presentation on lead poisoned children, labor statistics, fishing, subsistence fishing statistics, on how, and asthma at a conference in 1993 when the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection saw me and wanted me to come in and join discussions with them about perhaps creating a program to address environmental inequities, as they were called back then. So if I could have the first slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of their race, their color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and policies, right? Now the next slide, please.
Did I lose the one on the racism? Please let me pull it up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually two on racism. I can tell you that before we had an environmental justice program, we were actually environmental equity, and environmental equity implies that everything is, everything is done in an equitable manner. We don't necessarily need justice. The practices that we have at the agency are addressing everyone equally, right? So after a few years, we changed it to EJ because EJ implies that it's not all equal and that you have to go for justice, very similar to what affirmative action is like, right? You have to undo the wrongs that have occurred. So can you go down to the fourth slide, if possible? What is environmental racism? Right there. So environmental racism is the deliberate enactment of enforcement policies, practices, or regulations that result in a negative effect in the environment of racial and ethnic minority communities, right? Can I have the next slide, please?
I think that was the last one.
Oh, okay. So it can be defined as any government or industry action or failure to act that has a negative environmental impact that disproportionately harms a community, whether it's intentional or not, right? Which you would consider something like that analogous to institutional racism, right? And it doesn't matter what that impact is if it's disproportionate and it affects population groups and communities of color, and specifically dependent on that particular race, right? So that's environmental racism. So when I started at the agency, when we first started meeting, we created a coalition of organizations to participate in this conversation because there had been a study by the National Law Journal that assessed EPA's actions, their enforcement actions, where their enforcement took place, what the penalties were, where sites were being remediated, and across the board, what they found that white communities got stiffer enforcement penalties, right, against bad actors. They had remediation done much faster than communities of color, and that remediation of contaminated sites was done much faster as well, and the laws were not applied equally in the United States, and their findings were that there was a racial divide in environmental protection. So that got me started, and then we met regularly, the NAACP, at the time, Connecticut Civil Liberties Union, Migrant Women's Health, Tenants Association, ASPIDA, a youth organization out of Bridgeport, joined us. So it was quite a coalition of different groups to kind of talk about what do we do, how do we address it, and then the Department of back then Environmental Protection created the Environmental Equity Program and then subsequently hired me. And within a month, the residents of North Hartford cried environmental racism over how the North Hartford landfill was not being managed and maintained in an equitable way, and the odors were atrocious, and a number of other things, to the point where they couldn't open up their windows or sit outside to have a barbecue because the odors were so bad, right? And that subsequently, so that was the beginning of my career. And it was pretty direct, but it was excellent because the best part of it was that our agency was actually investigated by the federal government, EPA, as well as the Department of Justice, on our practices of just communicating, getting people involved, having people participate. I'm better, the agency is better for it. So that's just a small little smidgen of history with respect to EJ in Connecticut. And I think I'll stop there. Actually, let me just end by just a little piece that Stephanie wanted. My inspiration to get involved in equity, I was actually a consultant working in Houston, Texas, and I was taking some college courses, and a professor took us to this neighborhood that was predominantly Mexican or Latino neighborhood that had three toxic waste sites within walking distance. And we were touring it. He goes, I want to show you how this community, because it's a community of color, hasn't had any remediation or any enforcement taken. And when he took us to the site, this one particular hazardous waste site had a concrete kind of culvert to collect the any kind of toxic stormwater that might come from the site. It would drain there, right? So they at least put that drainage in, but there were little children in their tricycles riding it in the drainage ditches. That's when I decided to go into public health. That was my moment of inspiration. And that was 30 years ago. And here I am today, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Edith, for sharing both the definitions for environmental justice and environmental racism, as well as sharing, the work that you do and kind of what brought you to it. So we're going to invite Chloe Murphy and Julie Garay to do the same. I guess we can start with Julie, if you don't mind. Just introduce yourself, please. Tell us about the work you do, what brought you to it, and when you're done, pass the mic to Chloe.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Edith, for getting us started with this really amazing conversation. So I'm really excited to be here. Hello, everyone. Stephanie pronounced my last name perfectly. Oh, makes me so happy. So my name is Julie Garay. I am Puerto Rican. I am part of the small Puerto Rican diaspora here in New London in Connecticut. And I'm really excited to be here. So as you see me, like my eyes may look this way a little bit, and it's just because I have notes. I needed to prepare a little bit. So I am currently the senior program manager at Fresh New London. And so I have been at Fresh for 11 years now. In like spring break, it'll be 11 years. So that's exciting and a little terrifying, but that's fine. And so I think as we were talking about like, what do you do in your work, and tell us why you're connected to this. And I actually am going to switch that. So food justice and environmental justice is deep and rooted in my soul and my family for many reasons, right? So I am Caribbean, I'm from Puerto Rico. And as many know, our roots come from colonization, and it also comes from African descent as well as Native Indigenous descent. And growing food has been throughout the history of my people. And even still to this day, like my mom may not grow food at home. Well, we have a little garden bed, but she grows like spirit through cooking. And that is such a cultural importance to me. And like through that history, right? Like our history is putting our hands in dirt and being really happy. And it's kind of funny because Stephanie was like, yeah, I'll go to the garden. Just don't expect me to put my hands in dirt. That's totally fine. There's no pressure there. But our hands are supposed to be in dirt. Our hands are supposed to be in the kitchens. Our hands are there for, you know, we use our body for so many things. And so being a part of growing food and being a part of feeding people is a blessing to me. So with that being said, Fresh, I'll tell a little bit about Fresh. And Chloe and I come from the same org, but Chloe has a beautiful relationship to Indigenous growing and just environmental stuff. So I'm gonna let her say that, but I'm gonna start talking about Fresh a little bit. So Fresh is a food justice nonprofit here in New London. And we've been around for, I wanna say like 15 years, maybe like 16, 17, I don't know. But we grow food in all these different areas in New London. And part of this work is, again, environmental justice, right? And environmental racism. Our land is toxic. We cannot grow in our backyards. We cannot grow in our front yards. And even like the director at Fresh, she bought a house in New London, was really excited to start growing in the soil, and then got it tested. And it was like 3 times the level that it could be to grow in your backyard. So sadly, she can't grow in her backyard, but she got raised beds. So a lot of our work, a lot of our organizational growing is in raised beds. And part of this, like, you know, in relation to environmental injustices, we have currently a urban farm in New London. It's on Cottage Street. If anyone has been like to Fiddleheads, and across the street from Fiddleheads, there's a hill. If you look at that hill, there's a 3-layer, like 3-tier farm, and that's where we grow a lot of our food. And there is lead in that soil, and we grow in the ground, and we actually try to do amenities to really take care of and kind of, you know, support the removal of the lead and all these different tricks. And, you know, it's kind of our cool little experiment. And part of that is partnerships. We have a lot of partnerships, and one of them is a professor at Conn College. He is testing a lot of the vegetables that is grown at that site, and he's saying, okay, these are actually really good because we don't find lead in these foods. These, we're finding lead in them, so let's not grow these. So it's this really revolutionary thing, and it's happening like right now. But yeah, so that's just a little bit of what's going on at Fresh. But I want to mention these 3 buckets that we have before I pass it off to Chloe. So we kind of focus on these 3 different realms of work. We already talked about the growing food section, right? Then we do connecting communities, which is a lot of this stuff, right? Talking to people who have never heard of Fresh, talking to people who maybe hate growing or love growing, and kind of seeing how they can connect with Fresh, how they can get involved with us. And then the other part of things is empowering young people. So a lot of that's how I got involved. That's how Chloe got involved. I was a 14-year-old in high school that did not know anything about growing food, and was hit up by my middle school teacher and was like, hey, you want to come to a farm? And I'm like, why not? And that's how I got employed. And that's how we trick a lot of young people. We tell them, hey, want to go see a farm? And then they're like, whoa, this is a job. Okay, let's do it. But a lot of our work is empowering young people in our city to know their voice, to know the power they have in growing food, in feeding people, in like being able to dictate where we can have snack beds, where we can grow food along their streets as they walk to schools. It's a lot of fun work. Like, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun work. And lastly, I just want to say that what really brings me back to this work is we all have a connection to the land. And I think that always is like a reminder whenever I go to a garden, whenever I go to the farm. it's always like we all have smiles on our faces. Today it was really cold and kind of rainy, and we were building garden beds outside in the cold. My butt was super wet, but I was still really happy, you know? So just finding these ways that we are still human and we are making these great connections through land, through soil, through just, you know, feeding people. So I'm really happy to be here with y'all and answer any questions. But I'm sorry, Chloe, I talked so much. I'm gonna pass it off to Chloe.
Julia, I love when you talk so much because then I don't have to talk as much. I don't have to say anything about Fresh because you already explained it. Hi, everybody. My name is Chloe Murphy. Like Julie said, I'm also a member of Fresh. I've been with Fresh for just under 9 years. It'll be 9 years come this summertime. I'm currently transitioning out of Fresh because I'm not going to be around too much longer. But I've served in different roles. Like Julie, I started out in the youth program, and for the past several years, I have been employed at Fresh as the food justice educator. I'm sorry, y'all. I got my braces taken off today, and I cannot talk with my retainers. Just hold on.
I just want to say yay to straight teeth. Super exciting.
I don't even like them. $4,000 later, I still don't like my teeth. Anyway, y'all. So again, my name is Chloe. My background is that I'm Black, Filipino, and Chamorro. So for those who don't know, the Chamorro people are the indigenous people of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. So I'm Pacific Islander. Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands all hold a similar political status as Puerto Rico, American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands. They are all colonies of the United States. So that should tell you a little bit about the history of indigenous folks' relationship to the land that they are indigenous to. My father is African American, specifically. I had mentioned I was Black. And so the way I grew up with grass in my yard, but that's very different from how both my parents grew up. So growing up, my father used to have a garden with us because his father lived on a farm in South Carolina and moved to Hartford actually during the African American Great Migration and was a firefighter in the North End for many years. So my father grew up learning how to farm from his father, who had grown up on a farm. My grandmother grew up on Guam and lived with her grandmother, who owned some land in the southern portion of the island. But due to many factors that affect everybody of the diaspora, she ended up having to relocate her family over here. And one of the staples that had become a staple in Guam after World War II, when the United States repossessed the island, was Spam. So my mom grew up eating a lot of Spam. So I have a different relationship with Spam than my mother does because of the hard work she put in. I didn't have to grow up on Spam. And so because of the privilege I had of like being able to grow up and learn how to grow my own food and not have to eat on Spam, once I got involved in this work, I saw the importance of not only paying it forward, but also paying it back, paying it back to my grandmother, who had to relocate and move away from her land, and my grandfather, who had to relocate and move away from his land because of all these push and pull factors. But so when I was 15, yes, it was at lunch in the cafeteria, somebody, I don't even remember who, was handing out flyers, pamphlets for this summer program about growing food. Sorry, I'm reading the chat. The summer program was about growing food, and you could get paid. And so what I think is so special about Fresh is that we engage that like awkward age group of like 14, 15, just starting high school, when you're too old to go to summer camp, but you're too young to work. So what are you supposed to do? So this was a great opportunity. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm familiar with gardening. I grew tomatoes with my dad growing up. I can get involved in this. But it ended up being so much more than just growing food. I learned so much about everything that had affected me in my life. I was able to put language to my experiences, and that was so empowering, because as a young person, as a young person of color, you experience things like racism and microaggressions, and all sorts of these isms that affect our young people. And if you don't understand that there's systems in place and there's history in place that makes that happen, you can blame yourself. Sometimes I thought maybe I'm just a bad person. Maybe people just don't like me, and that's why I get treated the way I do. That's why people make fun of me the way they do. But that wasn't the case at all. And Fresh helped me realize that, and it made me understand the importance of being a steward of the land. And that's where food justice and environmental justice connect so deeply and intimately, because it's about building a relationship and building sovereignty with the land. So that especially resonated with me as a child of diaspora who one day does hope to reconnect with like my ancestral lands, and go to Guam and go to all these places and be stored and build relationships. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you all three of you for sharing, you know, what you do like professionally, but it not but, and it sounds like more of like a labor of love, right? Like it is like passion work that you do. And I just thank you for sharing your stories with us. Totally appreciate it. So my next question and my last question for you is, so now what? How do we, the listeners who are here in the Zoom, who might be listening on Facebook or may listen to the playback later, how do we help support the work that you're doing, one, and or how do we advance environmental justice? Like what are some ways that we can support environmental justice in our respective communities? Oh, anyone can just go. All right, gonna start with Ms. Edith, and then I'll pass it to Chloe, and then have Julie close out.
My screen is kind of frozen.
Yep, you are. Okay, we can, now it's good.
Okay. So I will tell you the reason that my program actually survives is because there are EJ advocates that continue to keep pressuring the agency to make changes, right? We are strong when we're responding to you, but I can tell you that what I've seen historically is that the bigger the coalition that you have together, right? Whatever issue it is that you want to deal with, whether it's a facility that's in your community, whether there's a waste facility, a plant, whether traffic, kind of community and say what's healthy about community, what's not healthy about community, and then the successful organizations that I've seen to actually address are the ones that pull together their resources and go out there and vocally demand change, right? Vocally demand that address an issue of a new facility coming in and what they object to. And actually sort of come together and start planning that vision for their community, and then moving forward and making sure that all the partners are in there, right? That you're working with local, your municipality, your local health department, the industry, as well as, you know, I'm always available to come and help you out and help you kind of navigate through the government bureaucracy. I'm a translator of bureaucracy to help you kind of walk through it. And I'm also more than happy to connect you with resources, depending on what it is that you're finding. But my experience is those communities that are really well organized are the ones that actually see change the fastest. Sometimes not as fast as you may want, but there is power in community.
Thank you. Chloe?
I definitely want to echo what Edith is saying, Miss Edith is saying, particularly about being aware of the policies in place in your community, as well as how you can get involved in advocacy work regarding newly formed policies, old policies, whatever it may be. So something that greatly impacts environmental justice and environmental racism in our communities is zoning policy, something as simple as zoning policy, where certain types of buildings can be and are built in our communities. And advocacy work is very important when it comes to new construction, demolition, all of those things in our communities. And Fresh has been pretty good about staying on top of what's going on in New London and recruiting folks to speak at city council meetings as well as different committee meetings. So that's something that is easy to look into and get involved with when it comes to environmental justice. Something I always want to highlight in regards to environmental justice is that this work is not based on individualism. I think it's great and effective for folks to look at their life, look at their individual carbon footprint and make adjustments where they can. Definitely reducing water usage, recycling as much as we can, but that's not what's going to save the world. Like Miss Edith said, it's really community and building power within our community groups that is going to make the change that we want to see. So definitely finding like-minded folks within your community who want to make a change, who want to be stewards of the land, who want to make sure that young people have safe air and water and soil to eat, drink, play with. That's very important as well.
Thanks, Chloe, and thank you, Edith. And yeah, I want to, everything y'all said, I totally agree with. And I think, so kind of jumping onto what Edith said, right? Like civic engagement and political engagement is such a, it's a pain in the butt, but it's so important, right? Especially like it's a pain in the butt depending on who you engage with. But at the same time, networking really is such an important part of like making change. So being involved, like Chloe mentioned, planning and zoning is a really strange place that has a lot of power, you know. For example, again, the farm that we have that's across the street from Fiddleheads on Cottage Street in New London, there is no planning and zoning like details about urban farming in New London. So we are basically kind of, don't tell anyone, even though this is on Facebook, we are kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but don't nobody gotta know that. So we're kind of figuring it out. We're working with the city to make this a thing, you know? So part of that, like planning and zoning as well. And also I really want to highlight, I have a lot of points as y'all were talking, I just kept typing. But something that I want to mention too, that Chloe said, it is not individualized impact that harms our environment in that way. And there was an amazing woman that said, oh my God, I forgot her name, but she was so great. She was an environmentalist, a Black environmentalist from Hartford. And she said, poor folks cannot afford to waste. We save everything. We recycle everything. So think about growing up and struggling financially. Your mom wasn't throwing everything away. Your family, we couldn't afford that. So we are the best environmentalists. We should be teaching our counterparts. So we shouldn't feel guilty for the impacts that have happened in our earth and in our lives. To be honest, it's the 1%ers, it's the big corporations that are really impacting and affecting our world. Industrialization, deindustrialization, all of these things are historically impacting our lives still to this day. So don't feel bad because, you know, you may not recycle every single day. That's totally fine. You're not burning the Amazon rainforest. It's okay. And some things that I want to mention too is that just some quick things that are like, you know, how you can help with Fresh in a sense. So we build garden beds, as I mentioned, and we build snack beds. One of the best ways to feed our people without harming them with like the toxins from the soil is we place garden beds around the city, wherever we can kind of maintain them. And it's free. We grow peppers, we grow tomatoes, all these delicious things. And folks I've seen many families park their cars, or as they're walking to the basketball court, they stop, grab some peppers and feed their kids with it. So if you know of any places in New London that we can place some garden beds, the main issue is sun and water. If it has sun and it has like a water access, let us know. And it has a lot of traction walking. If a lot of folks walk around it, that's even better. So that, and then also you can sponsor a family to receive a garden bed in their backyard or in their front yard. So we do mission-based, and then we also do like full sale kind of garden beds. And that is, the mission-based is almost completely free for any family in New London that financially cannot afford a garden bed. We give it to them. And we sometimes even give them plants to plant for themselves. We teach them some things as we, place those beds and everything. So that's another way you can sponsor a family. You can even get your own garden bed in your backyard. And again, like I said, thank you for being here. And like this is really kind of the first step. If you just learned about environmental racism, you're already ahead of a lot of people. You just heard some really awesome women talk about this. So yeah, thank you.
I want to add one more thing. Thank you, Julie. Julie and I are a really good team because Julie's really good at like narrowing things down. And I look at I cannot look at anything smaller than the big picture. But on a more national or like global note, I think another really strong way to support environmental justice movements is to look to Indigenous leaders. We live in the age of the internet. It's very easy to see what's going on around the world. How can I support Indigenous folks in the Marshall Islands who are trying to get reparations for the nuclear waste that has been dumped on their land and affects people's bodies and health right now, right? There's always petitions you can sign. There's always letters to Congress and senators that you can write, that you can support, money to be donated. There's always, all over the world, Indigenous folks doing the work and being stewards of the land. And they can be supported in many ways, thanks to the globalized world that we live in, which presents many challenges and opportunities. And even locally, yes, don't forget your local Indigenous tribes as well, and leaders.
So thank all of you for sharing like really clear ways that we can get involved, right? So you've really just laid everything out for us, from locally all the way up to globally. So I really appreciate that. Julie, I have one follow-up question. You mentioned something about being able to sponsor the boxes for families. Can you tell us about like what that looks like cost-wise? Because I think that for those of us who are looking to do something and like the pay it forward thing, like that would be like one small way to do that.
Yeah, that is a great question. Thank you, Stephanie. So like for us, for a full sale, someone that wants, a garden bed and they want to support fresh and they can fully purchase the bed and also the soil, I think we rounded around $150 to $200. If you want to sponsor a family, you can pay that much, but you can also donate $25, $50 and be like, hey, I want this to go towards sponsoring a family. So it's no pressure, like you have to pay an entire bed, because the bed is a 6x3 foot and then 3 feet tall, 3 feet tall bed, and it's made with it's like the recycled like plasticky wood that they use for oh my God, decks, like outside decks. We don't buy it. We actually get it donated from an organization close to New London, which, this is part of having community partners, right? Is they know we do good things, so they donate things to us. So that's really exciting. So we built those beds. The young people in our program build them. A lot of gardeners, a lot of what are those called, volunteers as well. So we install those beds and then we drop off about a yard of soil, and then after we drop off that yard of soil, folks can plant their own seeds. They can come to our plant sales. They can purchase their own plants. For some families, we also sponsor the plants for them, so it doesn't come out of any of their cost. So again, like I said, you can donate $20, $100, whatever you want. All you have to do, you can go to our website, and all you have to do is say, I would like this to go to a sponsoring a family. And even in our website, if you want to get your own bed, you can also you can also, on our website, we have that. Our website is freshnewlondon.org. And one other thing I just want to mention, thanks for giving me the mic, Stephanie, because how did you know I wanted to say one more thing? Like I said, like Stephanie says, she's not putting her hand in soil. To be a partner of Fresh, to be a member of Fresh, you don't have to touch soil ever in your life. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. There are a lot of ways for you to be involved. We have a CSA as well, where it's a lot of grown food that young people have grown, our farmers, our volunteers have grown, and it's like, about 15 pounds of food a week for the entire growing season. And again, you can even sponsor a family for that as well. So if you want to go to our website and say, hey, this money is going towards sponsoring a family for CSA, we have last year, I think we had 15 mission-based CSAs. So we were able to raise enough money to sponsor 15 families. And then we had about 5 to 10 families that were full price, that decided to get CSAs with us and pay full price. And every single mission family is in New London. So it was amazing. It's really great. Fresh is awesome. How many times can I say that? Maybe a million, but yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing that information so that folks who are interested can donate. I actually need to check in with you offline to talk to you about some opportunities with that. So there is a question. I know that Isabel had a question earlier about threats and opportunities, and I feel like you all answered that when you were talking about like the what next. So let's see, Ms. Edith has a question. Has the EPA offered a soil shop in New London where people can get their soil tested for lead? Do either of you know about that?
So that's a great question, Edith. Connecticut College, I think, is testing soil for us for free. Any families that want to get their soil tested. Thank you for saying that, because again, this is live on Facebook. So families on Facebook can also hear this. But if anyone wants to get their soil tested in New London, Conn College is doing it for free. So please, again, reach out if you need that connection. We will totally support you in that. And if you're out of Connecticut, not out of Connecticut, if you're out of New London and you also want to get your soil tested, we can find ways to support you in that. I think UConn does. Yeah, usually local colleges. Yep. UConn Extension definitely does testing. And I think it's like a pretty cheap price. It's not too expensive. It's pretty affordable. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
The EPA does it for free.
How do we get our soil to the EPA?
So no. So Doris is online here too. I don't know if Doris Johnson, she works with me as well. What we can do is get you in touch with EPA to schedule a soil shop in New London. They do it in partnership with, I believe it's the Natural Resource Council. They do it in partnership with them. Basically, they'll give you a little bag. You go home. There's like pre-kits that are given out. You go home, take a little soil sample, you bring it in, and they'll test it for lead, so you know what's on the soil, in your backyard, right, or in the area that you wish to perhaps plant something. So we can connect you after this. Please, I put my email in there. I'll retype it. Please email me, and we'll start the conversation and try and work that out. Okay.
All right. So I have Isabel has a question, and then I have another question in the chat that I'll ask after you all address Isabel.
Hey, everybody. So I just saw in the chat that Alvin Melendez had an idea around connections to Husky. And Alvin, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but I think making those connections is super important. So I don't know if there's maybe some just way for you all to talk after the meeting, or Alvin, if you want to talk a little bit about what you were thinking.
Well, thank you so much. Again, Elvin Melendez, and I'm sorry, I'm in my dining room. Elvin Melendez, I'm the Director of Community Affairs and Engagement at Community Health Network of Connecticut. For those that don't know, CHNCT, we are contracted with the Department of Social Services to manage the Husky Health Program for the state of Connecticut. We manage the medical piece for over 1 million Husky Health recipients. And one thing that I thought of as we start returning back out into the field is connecting with these agencies throughout the entire state of Connecticut, whereby we can send a community health worker to set up Husky presence and help educate Husky Health recipients that are frequent traffickers of these locations on how to utilize their benefits, how to request for an ID card, how to get connected to a primary care physician. We can even help them schedule an appointment for them. We'll have our laptops on hand to go into the system and make that happen for them. But also connect these individuals that might need additional community support services with resources in their town to address that social determinants of health. And so that might be something that Fresh might welcome into their facilities, or even at one of their farmers market or something, where they have a tutorial on how to create these baskets, right? These planting baskets locations. And so I'm throwing it out there. My contact information is on the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me. I am looking to support any organization, especially in New London, that would be willing to welcome us to set up Husky presence. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvin. This is wonderful. Just another great connection made, like just by virtue of this meeting. So thank you so much. I do have another question. And I'm going to ask it. Someone DM'd me, so I'm going to ask it exactly as asked. Question: what is the difference in the garden bed and the snack bed? Are they growing potato chips in the snack beds? So, Julie, Chloe.
Oh my gosh, I love that question. I mean, you could make potato chips from the potatoes grown in the snack beds. But okay, I'm gonna get back to the real question. So the difference between snack beds and garden beds, right? So the garden beds are that are beds that are placed either in your backyard, your front yard, or we have community garden beds all throughout New London. Specifically, we have our main site, which is Mercer Garden across the street from Jennings, as well as Minnie Dover. We also have McDonald Park. Those are all garden beds. Snack beds are beds for anyone and everyone. Even if you are driving down a street and see a snack bed, usually our garden beds have like a fence around them, just so you know those are for gardeners. But the snack beds are free and for anyone. So on Broad Street, across the street from Dunkin' Donuts, which is a pain in the butt location, because then we find a lot of Dunkin' Donuts cups, but it's totally fine. It's fine. We have snack beds there, and those are about 2, 4, 6. I want to say about 6 beds that are completely open. And in the next couple weeks, the next couple months, you should walk by there because you can grab some really delicious strawberries. So snack beds are open for anyone and everyone, and we maintain them, and you just pick from them. If you want to maintain them, that would be wonderful. But we are in charge of watering, we are in charge of weeding, all that stuff. You just grab and go. So that's kind of, hopefully that was understandable. But yeah.
Thank you. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to pass it back to Kia to close us out. And I again want to thank all of the panelists and then everyone who showed up to participate, listen, learn, and participate.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, ladies, powerful ladies, humans, beings who are here. And thank you so much for everything that you shared. And to Isabel's point, the opportunity to connect on some things, right? So I know there was a lot in the chat, but please feel free to scroll back if you can and grab folks' contact information, or if folks want to put it back in there really quickly so that people can see it. But thank you. I thank you all for the work that you are doing, the inspiration that you are to the community, and just kind of living this world that we want to leave for the folks that come behind us. Right? We want folks to be able to breathe and eat and eat healthy food and live in an environment that is safe and healthy. So I appreciate you all for your work, and I see lots and lots of opportunities for collaboration. Miss Edith already offered, I think she offered or volunteered her to come back and talk about some of the data and some of the numbers and the that we know that you know, we do a lot of this work just out of the goodness of our heart, but we have data to back it up, and we know that it is necessary and that the work that you all are doing has an impact. So, you know, I can't thank you enough. We will be back here for one more next month. And it's what's next month? April? April. So the fourth Thursday of April at 7, we'll be back here for another one. So please keep an eye out. Again, HIC, if you want to join the work that we're doing, please plan to join the HIC in our region. And that's also where you can find information about these sessions as we do them going forward. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. You guys are wonderful. Have a great night. Be safe, and we will see you soon.
Good night, all.
Good night, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.